Chapter 1. The bride who could not see her Captorth wedding had been a transaction, not a celebration. Alara stood in the center of the stone chapel, her white gown heavy as a shroud, her hands cold despite the summer heat that pressed against the stained glass windows. She could not see the man she was being given to. She had been blind since birth, her world measured in textures and temperatures, in the cadence of voices and the weight of silence. But she could feel him. He stood 3 paces away. She knew this by the shift in air pressure. By the way, sound seemed to bend around him like water around a stone. He did not breathe. That was the first thing she noticed. The priest's voice trembled as he spoke the vows, and somewhere behind her, her father's boots scraped against marble with a nervous rhythm that betrayed his desperation. House Tenebris had paid her family's debts. In return, they demanded a bride for their youngest lord. No dowry, no negotiation, just Alara, the daughter no one else would take, delivered to a household, whispered about in every tavern between here and the capital. Do you consent? The priest asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara opened her mouth. The word yes firmed on her tongue, bitter and dutiful. Before she could speak, a hand caught hers. His skin was cold. Not cold, like marble left in winter shadow. His fingers were long, elegant, and impossibly still. No tremor, no warmth, no pulse beneath the skin. She consents, he said. His voice was low, controlled, and edged with something she couldn't name. Not cruelty, not kindness, something older than both. The ceremony ended in silence. Her father did not stay for the wedding feast. By the time Alara was led from the chapel, her hands still clasped in her husband's frozen grip. The sun had set and the manor had come alive with sounds she did not recognize, footsteps too light, voices too smooth, laughter that carried no breath. He did not speak to her as they walked. The corridors were vast, she could tell by the echo of their steps. By the way, temperature shifted as they passed tall windows and open archways. Candles burned somewhere nearby. She smelled beeswax and something sharper, metallic, beneath it. You will have the east wing, he said at last, stopping before a door. No one will enter without your permission. Not even you? She asked. There was a pause, long enough that she wondered if he had left. Not even me, he said quietly. He released her hand. The door opened. She heard the scrape of iron hinges, felt the rush of cooler air from within. He guided her inside with a touch to her elbow, brief and impersonal, then stepped back into the corridor. Your belongings will arrive tomorrow, he said. If you need anything tonight, ring the bell by the hearth. Someone will come. What is your name? Alara asked. Another pause. Caspian, he said. And what are you? Caspian of House Tenebris. She heard the intake of breath. No, not breath. A stillness so profound it felt like the absence of breath. Like the moment before a storm broke. Your husband, he said simply. The door closed. Alara stood alone in the darkness that had always been hers, listening to the manor settle around her like a living thing. She found the bed by touch, its frame carved with intricate designs she traced with her fingertips, vines and thorns, crescent moons, symbols she could not name. She did not sleep. The stables were an accident. 3 days had passed in careful isolation. Servants came and went in whispers, leaving trays of food she barely touched. Caspian did not visit. She heard him sometimes, moving through distant halls. His footsteps deliberate and soundless, in a way that defied logic. On the 4th night, restless and suffocated by stillness, Alara left her room. She had learned the manor by increments, 43 steps from her door to the main staircase, 12 more to the corridor that smelled of rain and old wood. She followed the scent of hay and horses, her cane tapping softly against stone, until she found herself in the stables. The air here was warmer, alive with the sounds of animals shifting in their stalls. She heard the soft blow of breath, the rustle of straw, and beneath it all a low, ragged sound. Pain. Alara moved toward it instinctively, her fingers trailing along the rough wood of the stall doors until she found him. Caspian was on the ground. She knew it was him by the cold that radiated from his body, by the unnatural stillness beneath, the tremor of agony. Something wet and warm pooled beneath her hand when she knelt. Blood, she realized with a start. Too much of it. Don't, he said, his voice hoarse. Don't touch me. But she already had. Her hands found the wound in his side, a gash that wept crimson, and something darker, something that burned her fingertips like acid. He hissed through his teeth, trying to pull away, but he was too weak. What happened? She demanded. Rival house, he ground out. Silver-tipped blade. It will heal, but not fast enough, she finished. She tore a strip from her nightgown, pressing it against the wound. He caught her wrist, his grip fierce despite the pain. You should not be here, he said. Neither should you. Bleeding in a stable like a hunted animal, that is what I am. His words hung in the air between them. Alara felt the truth of it settle in her bones, the coldness of his skin, the absence of breath, the blood that burned. She should have been afraid, should have run. Instead, she kept pressure on the wound. What are you? She asked again, softer this time. In the darkness they both inhabited, Caspian exhaled something that might have been a laugh or a confession. A monster wed to a woman who cannot see monsters, he said. Alara's hands did not waver. Then, tell me what I need to know to keep you alive. Chapter 2. Blood and boundary. As the wound would not close, Alara felt the heat of it against her palms. The way his body shuddered with each breath, he forced himself to take a mimicry of life, she realized, not a necessity. He was performing humanity for her benefit, even now, even bleeding. Silver prevents healing, Caspian said through gritted teeth. It must be removed. Then let me help. You cannot see. I don't need to see to find metal and flesh, Alara interrupted. Her fingers were already exploring the edges of the wound, careful and methodical. She had spent her entire life learning the world through touch. This was no different. Tell me how deep. A long silence. Then, 3 inches, angled toward the ribs. She worked by feel, her hands steady despite the wrongness of his blood to cold, too thick, like oil mixed with wine. Caspian remained perfectly still beneath her touch, but she felt the tension coiled in his frame. The supernatural control it took not to flinch away from her probing fingers. When she found the fragment of silver, small as a thorn, but burning hot against her skin, she pulled it free in one swift motion. He made no sound, but the air around them changed. The cold intensified, spreading outward like frost across glass, and Alara felt the wound begin to knit itself close beneath her bloodied hands. Muscle and skin reformed with a speed that defied nature, until only a thin scar remained. It's done, she whispered. Caspian caught her wrists before she could pull away. His grip was gentle now, careful, as though she were the fragile one. You should wash, he said quietly. My blood will burn if it stays on your skin. He was right. Her palms had begun to sting, a creeping heat that felt like nettles. He guided her to a water trough at the far end of the stables, his hand at her elbow, and she scrubbed the darkness from her hands while he stood watch in silence. Why were you attacked? She asked. House Moreau believes I violated the accords. Did you? No, his voice was flat, final. But truth matters less than accusation in the night courts. They want war. I am simply a convenient excuse. Alara dried her hands on her ruined nightgown. And what are the accords? She felt him turn toward her, studying her with senses she could not fathom. You truly do not know what I am, he said. Not a question. A realization. I know you're cold. I know. You don't breathe unless you choose to. I know your blood burns and silver wounds you. She lifted her chin. I know. You've kept your distance from me for 3 days, as though proximity itself were dangerous. It is. Why? Caspian moved closer, close enough that she felt the absence of warmth radiating from him like a winter wind. When he spoke, his voice was low and edged with something raw. Because you are mortal. Because your blood sings in your veins loud enough to drown out thought. Because the accords forbid taking without consent, and I am trying. He stopped. Drew a breath he did not need. I am trying to honor the vows I spoke in that chapel. Understanding dawn cold and certain. You're a vampire, Alara said. Yes. She should have been afraid. Every story she had ever heard painted them as monsters, predators in human skin. But stories had also told her the blind were helpless, pitiable, broken. She had learned young that stories lied. The marriage, she said slowly. It wasn't about paying my father's debts, was it? No, Caspian's voice held a note of bitter resignation. House Tenebris is bound by ancient law to maintain alliances through blood or marriage. Your father offered you to secure protection from House Moreau's ambitions. We accepted to prevent a massacre in your village, so I'm a political shield. You are a wife, he corrected. And something in his tone made the distinction matter. Under the accords, that grants you protections even I cannot violate. Your consent is absolute. Your blood is your own. No one in this house may touch you without permission. Alara absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. But House Moreau doesn't care about the Accords. House Moreau believes might supersedes law. They have been hunting for an excuse to break the treaty for decades. He paused. They will come here eventually. When they do, you should not be anywhere near me. Because they'll kill you. Because they'll kill anyone loyal to House Tenebris. His hand found hers in the darkness, cold fingers curling around her wrist, where her pulse beat steady and warm. Including wives who know too much. The weight of it settled over her like a shroud. She had been sold into this marriage to save her village, only to find herself a target in a war she had not known existed. You should have told me, she said. Would you have believed me? Fair point. Alara pulled her hand free and turned toward the stable doors, her cane, finding the familiar rhythm of stone beneath her feet. She made it 3 steps before his voice stopped her. Where are you going? To my room, she said simply. You said I had the east wing, that no one would enter without permission. That still stands. She looked back over her shoulder, a gesture born of habit, not sight. Good, because tomorrow night, you're going to teach me everything I need to know about vampire houses, the Accords, and why House Moreau wants you dead. Why? Because if I'm going to die in a war I didn't start, Alara said evenly. I'd prefer to understand it first. She felt his surprise in the silence that followed. In the slight shift of air as he moved, You're not afraid, Caspian said. And it sounded almost like an accusation. I've been afraid my whole life, Alara replied. Of being helpless. Of being a burden. Of never mattering. She straightened her spine. I refuse to spend whatever time I have left afraid of the truth. She left him standing in the stables, surrounded by horses and hay and the lingering scent of his own strange blood, behind her. So quiet she almost missed it. She heard him say, You matter. But by then she was already gone. Chapter 3. Lessons in Darkness. Caspian came to her chambers the following night. Precisely at moonrise, Alara knew it was him. Before he knocked she had learned to recognize the particular quality of silence that preceded his presence. The way warmth seemed to retreat from the air. When she opened the door, he stood in the corridor like a statue carved from shadow and stone. You wanted lessons, he said. I'm here to provide them. She stepped aside to let him enter. He moved past her with careful distance, as though they were bound by invisible threads he dared not break. She heard him pause near the window, where moonlight would be streaming through glass she could not see. Sit, Alara said, gesturing toward the chairs by the cold hearth. And start at the beginning, Caspian repeated. A trace of dark amusement in his voice. Was 4,000 years ago. I'll spare you the full history. Then start with what I need to survive. He was silent for a moment, considering. Then he began. There are 7 great houses, he said. Each controls a territory, a bloodline, and a seat in the night courts. House Tenebris, my house, holds dominion over the northern provinces. We are scholars, strategists, keepers of old knowledge. House Moreau controls the southern cities. They are warriors, conquerors, believers in the old ways, the ways before the Accords. Alara guessed. Yes, she heard him shift, restless despite his stillness. 300 years ago, the houses were at war. Humans were cattle, hunted for sport as much as sustenance. Entire villages disappeared in a single night. It was unsustainable. We were turning into the monsters your stories claimed we were. Alara settled into her chair, listening. The Accords were drafted by House Tenebris and 4 others, Caspian continued. They established rules, consent before feeding, protection for mortal families bound to vampire houses, consequences for violation. They transformed us from predators into something closer to civilization, and House Moreau rejected this. They signed the treaty, he said bitterly, but they never believed in it. To them, the Accords are chains. They have been waiting for an opportunity to break them and return to the old ways, and you're their opportunity. I represent everything they despise. I have never taken blood without consent. I have spent 2 centuries enforcing the Accords, hunting vampires who violate them. When they accused me of breaking the treaty myself, it was a lie designed to justify war. Alara finished. Yes, she absorbed this, piecing together the political landscape she had been thrust into. What did they claim you did? Caspian's silence stretched so long she thought he might not answer. They claimed I killed a mortal under House Moreau's protection, he said finally. Drained them and left the body in my territory as a message. But you didn't. No, his voice was ice and iron. But the body was real. The blood evidence was real. Someone is framing me, and they are very good at it. Alara leaned forward, her hands clasped in her lap. Who would benefit from a war between your houses? That, Caspian said softly, is the question that keeps me awake during the day. Do vampires sleep? The question seemed to catch him off guard. She heard something that might have been a quiet laugh. Yes, he said. Sunlight forces a kind of stasis, death without dying. We are conscious, but paralyzed, vulnerable. It's why the old castles were built with catacombs and windowless chambers. Is that where you go during the day? The catacombs beneath this manor? You notice them. I hear the echo when I walk the halls. Stone goes down farther than it should. She tilted her head. Do you dream when you sleep that way? Another pause. No one has ever asked me that before. Do you? Yes, Caspian admitted quietly. I dream of sunlight, of warmth, of things I can never have again. The vulnerability in his voice struck something deep in Alara's chest. She had expected lessons in vampire politics, in houses and accords and ancient wars. She had not expected this, the loneliness beneath his careful control, the weight of centuries in a single confession. How long have you been this way? She asked. 243 years, and in all that time, you've never broken the accords? Never. The word was absolute. I remember what I was before, what we all were. I refused to return to that. Alara stood and moved toward his voice, her hand outstretched until her fingers found his shoulder. He went rigid beneath her touch, every muscle locked. You're cold, she said unnecessarily. Always? Does it hurt? Not anymore. His voice had gone rough. Alara, you should not. You've been alone a long time, haven't you? The question hung in the air between them like a living thing. Yes, Caspian said finally. She felt the truth of it in the tension beneath her palm, in the way he held himself so carefully still, as though afraid movement would shatter something fragile. She understood that kind of loneliness, the isolation of being feared, of being treated as something less than whole. I won't pretend to understand what you are, Alara said quietly, but I know what it's like to be seen as a burden, as something broken that needs to be hidden away or married off. She squeezed his shoulder gently. You're not a monster, Caspian. Monsters don't spend centuries enforcing consent. Monsters don't bleed in stables rather than risk frightening their wives. You don't know what you're saying, don't I? She pulled her hand back. You've had 3 days alone with a blind woman in your home. You could have done anything. Instead, you gave me space, safety, answers when I asked for them. She moved back toward her chair. If you're a monster, you're doing a terrible job of it. She heard him stand, heard the whisper of fabric as he moved toward the door. The lessons will continue tomorrow, he said, his voice carefully neutral. You need to know the other houses, their strengths, their weaknesses, what to do if they come for you. Caspian, he stopped. Thank you, Alara said, for telling me the truth. In the darkness they both inhabited, she heard him pause at the threshold. Get some rest, he said softly. Tomorrow the real education begins. The door closed. Alara sat in silence, her fingers tracing the place on her shoulder where his cold hand had briefly covered hers before he'd pulled away. Something was shifting between them. Something neither of them had planned for. Something dangerous. Chapter 4. The weight of Nemesthi lessons became a ritual. Every night after moonrise, Caspian came to her chambers. Sometimes they sat by the hearth, where servants had begun lighting fires at Alara's request, not for warmth, she claimed, but for the sound of crackling wood, the scent of smoke. Sometimes they walked the manor's corridors while he described the portraits that lined the walls, centuries of tenebrous lords and ladies, their faces painted in oils she would never see. Tonight, he had brought her to the library. Alara ran her fingers over the spines of books she could not read, feeling the embossed leather, the gilt edges, the weight of accumulated knowledge. The room smelled of parchment and dust and something older, time itself, perhaps, settled into the shelves like sediment. House Valenshade controls the western coast, Caspian said, continuing the lesson from the night before. They are merchants, diplomats. They profit from the accords more than any other house, which makes them our most reliable allies, and the least trustworthy. Alara added. She felt his approval in the brief silence. You learn quickly. I've had practice reading between words. She turned toward his voice. When you're blind, people either speak to you like you're simple, or they forget you're listening. You learn to hear what they're not saying. What am I not saying? The question caught her off guard. Alara tilted her head, considering. That you're afraid? She said finally. Not of House Moreau. Of something closer. Caspian moved to the window. She heard the shift of curtains, felt the change in air as he looked out at whatever moon-washed landscape stretched beyond the glass. You're perceptive, he said quietly. What frightens you, Caspian? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, that I will fail. That the frame around me will hold, and House Moreau will get their war, and everything the Accords built will burn. He paused. That people will die because I could not prove my innocence. Alara crossed the library toward him, her cane tapping softly against marble. When she reached the window, she stood beside him, close enough to feel the cold that emanated from his body like a second presence. Then we find proof, she said simply. We? Did you think I'd sit in the East Wing embroidering while you fought alone? She almost smiled. I'm already a target, Caspian. You said so yourself. I'd rather be useful. You are not a weapon to be wielded. No, Alara agreed. I'm a woman who can move through your house unnoticed, because everyone assumes the blind are helpless. I'm someone who hears conversations servants think I can't understand. I'm your wife, which means I have access to places even your enemies must respect. She turned toward him. I'm an advantage you haven't considered. She felt his gaze on her, intense despite the darkness between them. You would risk yourself for a house you've known less than a week? I would risk myself for a man who has shown me more respect in that week than I received in 23 years among my own kind. Alara's voice was steady. And I would do it to keep a war from reaching my village, from killing people who sold me away, but don't deserve to die for it. Caspian was silent for so long she thought she had overstepped. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers cold and careful as they curled around her palm. You are remarkable, he said quietly. Heat rose to her cheeks. She was grateful for once, for the darkness that hid her expression. Tell me about the night of the murder, she said, redirecting. Every detail. He released her hand, and she felt the loss of contact like a physical thing. It was 3 weeks ago, Caspian began. I was in the night courts, attending a session on trade disputes between House Valenshade and House Somner. Standard politics. I was there from sunset until dawn, with 40 witnesses. Perfect alibi. Too perfect, perhaps. His voice turned bitter. The body was found the next evening in my hunting grounds. A young man, no more than 19. His throat torn open. My blood or something close enough under his fingernails. Could someone have stolen your blood? Vampire blood degrades rapidly outside the body. Within hours, it becomes inert. He moved away from the window, restless. But there are ways to preserve it. Dark rituals. Forbidden magic. The kind of knowledge House Tenebris has spent centuries suppressing. Alara's mind raced. Which means someone with access to your house's archives. Someone who knows the old ways. Yes. How many people have that kind of access? In House Tenebris, 12 scholars, myself included. Caspian's footsteps echoed across the library. I've suspected each of them in turn. Found nothing. No proof. No motive. No connection to House Moreau. What about connections to the other houses? I've searched for 2 weeks. There's nothing. Alara heard the exhaustion in his voice, the weight of investigation piling onto centuries of responsibility. An idea formed, delicate and half-wild. What was the victim's name? She asked. Thomas Aldridge. And his family? A mother. 2 sisters. They lived in a village under House Moreau's protection. Caspian paused. Why? Because everyone focuses on who killed him, Alara said slowly. But what if the real question is why he was chosen? Why that specific person, in that specific place, at that specific time? She heard Caspian go, still, the particular quality of attention he gave when something struck him as important. You think he wasn't random, he said. I think nothing about this is random. Someone framed you perfectly. They knew your schedule, your territory, your bloodline. They chose a victim whose death would enrage House Moreau specifically. Alara turned toward where she knew he stood. What if Thomas Aldridge was connected to something larger? What if his death serves a purpose beyond starting a war? Such as? I don't know yet. She moved toward him, her cane tracing familiar paths across the marble. But I know someone who might. The servants here, they hear things, see things. They know the gossip from other houses, the movements of nobles and merchants. You want to question the servants. I want to listen to them, Alara corrected. People speak freely around me. They forget I'm listening. Caspian caught her hand again, and this time he didn't let go. This is dangerous, he said. If whoever framed me discovers you're investigating, then we'll be careful. She squeezed his cold fingers. Unless you have a better plan? His thumb traced a small circle against her palm, an unconscious gesture that sent warmth spiraling through her chest. No, he admitted. I don't. Then we start tomorrow night, Alara said. With the servants who attend the eastern halls. They'll know which visiting nobles have come and gone in recent weeks. Alara, yes? In the darkness, she felt him lean closer, felt the cold of him like winter wind against her skin. Thank you, Caspian said softly, for believing me. You've given me no reason not to. She heard him exhale that mimicry of breath he performed when emotion threatened his control. Get some rest, he said, releasing her hand. Tomorrow, we hunt for truth. He left her standing in the library, surrounded by books she could not read and questions she was determined to answer. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, an enemy was watching, but for the first time since her wedding. Alara felt like she was no longer helpless. She was hunting too. Chapter 5. Whispers in the house. Servants spoke more freely than Alara had anticipated. She spent the following 3 nights in the manor's common spaces, the kitchens where bread was baked for the few mortal retainers, the sitting rooms where maids mended linens, the corridors where footsteps echoed and voices carried. She sat with her embroidery hoop, her fingers working thread through fabric and patterns she created by touch alone. And she listened. Oddity first. They were careful around her, polite, deferential, but blindness, she had learned long ago, made people careless. They forgot she could hear the butlers whispered concern about strange visitors in the night. They didn't notice when she tilted her head toward the maids discussing a merchant from House Valenshade who had visited twice in the past month, always asking about Lord Caspian's whereabouts. On the 3rd night, she heard the name. That changed everything. Poor thing. That Aldridge boy, one of the kitchen maids said, her voice heavy with sympathy. His sister came through here not a month before he died, you know. Worked in the scullery for a week. Alara's needle paused mid-stitch. Did she? Another maid replied. I don't remember that. You were visiting your mother in the village. But I remember pretty thing, dark hair, quiet. Said she needed the work after their father passed. Lord Caspian was kind to her, gave her extra wages when she left. Alara's mind raced. Thomas Aldridge's sister had been here, in House Tenebris, weeks before her brother's murder. She waited until the maids moved to another room before carefully folding her embroidery and making her way to Caspian's study. She found him surrounded by papers. She could smell the ink, hear the whisper of parchment as he sorted through documents with methodical precision. Alara, his voice carried surprise. It's barely past midnight. You should be. Thomas Aldridge had a sister, she interrupted. She worked here, in your household. 1 month before he died. The rustling of papers stopped. What? Alara moved into the room, her cane, finding the chair across from his desk. The kitchen maids were talking. A girl came seeking work, said her father had just died. You gave her employment for a week, then sent her away with extra wages. I employ many people, Caspian said slowly. I would need to check the household records. Her name was Aldridge. The maids remembered because of what happened after. Because her brother's death connected back to this house. Alara leaned forward. Don't you see? She was here. She had access. If someone wanted your blood, your schedule, information about your hunting grounds, they could have used her. Caspian's voice had gone cold with realization. She could have been a spy without even knowing it. Or she could have been complicit. She heard him stand, heard the sharp sound of a drawer being pulled open. Papers scattered across the desk. The household ledger, he muttered. Every servant is recorded, every wage paid. His voice trailed off. Here, Margarethe Aldridge. Employed for 6 days in the scullery. Dismissed with 3 silver marks. Standard wages plus a bonus. Why did you dismiss her? I don't. He paused. Wait, I remember now. She was caught in the family wing. Claimed she was lost, looking for the kitchens. But the family wing is nowhere near the scullery. What's in the family wing? My personal chambers. The library. The vault where we keep. Caspian's words cut off sharply. Keep what? The blood records. His voice was barely above a whisper. Every member of House Tenebris has a sealed vial of their blood stored in the vault. It's an old tradition, meant to verify lineage and identity in case of disputes. The seals are supposed to be unbreakable, but if someone knew the right ritual, Alara felt ice spreading through her veins. She could have stolen a sample of your blood and preserved it using the forbidden knowledge from our own archives. Caspian slammed his hand against the desk, the impact sharp and violent. I was a fool. I saw a grieving girl and showed her mercy, and you showed kindness to someone in need, Alara interrupted firmly. You couldn't have known. I should have questioned her more thoroughly. Should have Caspian. She stood and moved around the desk, following the sound of his breathing, the unnecessary breathing he only did when agitated. You were set up by someone who knew exactly how to exploit your nature. Someone who knew you would help a mortal in distress. She found his arm, felt the tension coiled beneath his sleeve. We need to find her, he said. Margarethy Aldridge. If she's still alive, she can testify to who put her up to this. If she's dead, then we find who killed her, Alara finished. Either way, it's proof you were framed. Caspian turned toward her, and she felt the intensity of his focus like physical weight. This is dangerous, he said. If we're right, if someone orchestrated this entire plot, they won't let us unravel it peacefully. Then we'll be careful. Alara, I'm already involved, she said quietly. The moment I married you, I became part of this. You can either let me help, or I'll investigate on my own and make twice as many mistakes. She heard something that might have been a laugh. Bitter and brief. You are impossibly stubborn. I learned from necessity. She squeezed his arm. Where do we start? Caspian was silent for a moment, considering. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted into something colder. More dangerous, the voice of a man who had spent 2 centuries enforcing laws and hunting those who broke them. House Moreau, he said. Thomas Aldridge lived under their protection. If Margarethy still lives, she'll be in their territory. And if she doesn't, he paused. Then someone in House Moreau knows what happened to her. Can we go there? To their territory? Not without invitation. The Accords grant each house sovereignty over their lands. To enter uninvited would be an act of war. His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. But there's a gathering in for days. A night market held on neutral ground, where all the houses send representatives to trade and negotiate. Will House Moreau attend? They must, if they want to maintain the pretense of honoring the Accords. She heard the grim smile in his voice. And you, as my wife, have every right to accompany me. Alara's pulse quickened. Then we go to the night market. We find someone from House Moreau who knew Thomas. We ask about his sister. We'll need to be subtle. One wrong question, and they'll know we're investigating. Leave that to me, Alara said. I've spent my whole life being underestimated. People tell me things they'd never tell someone they considered a threat. Caspian's fingers tightened around hers. You're brilliant, he said softly. And terrifying. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. They stood like that for a moment, hands clasped in the darkness, both of them aware they were crossing a threshold. This was no longer just about clearing Caspian's name. This was choosing to stand together against whatever conspiracy had framed him. For days, Alara said. We have 4 days to prepare. Then we should start now. Caspian released her hand, and she heard him moving around the study, gathering papers. You need to know the protocols of the night market. How to address the other houses. What questions will seem innocent, and which will raise suspicion. Alara smiled into the darkness. Then teach me, she said, and as the night stretched toward dawn, Caspian did exactly that, his voice low and careful, painting pictures of a world she would never see, but was learning to navigate nonetheless. Outside, the moon tracked its arc across the sky. Inside, 2 hunters prepared their trap. Chapter 6. The night market carriage ride to neutral ground took 3 hours. Alara sat across from Caspian in the enclosed cabin, feeling the sway of the vehicle over cobblestones, then dirt roads, then something smoother, marble perhaps, laid down centuries ago by vampires who had built their world in the spaces between human civilization. We're approaching the market, Caspian said. Can you hear it? Alara tilted her head, listening past the rhythm of hoofbeats. There a low hum of voices, music threading through the air, the distinctive clink of metal and glass. But beneath it all, something else. A vibration she felt more than heard, as though the very air thrummed with concentrated power. What is that? She asked. That, pressure. 7 houses gathered in one place, Caspian said. 7 bloodlines, each carrying centuries of accumulated power. You're feeling the weight of it. The carriage slowed, then stopped. A door opened, and cool night air rushed in, carrying scents Alara couldn't identify, spices and smoke. Flowers that only bloomed in darkness, and beneath it all, That same metallic tang she had smelled on Caspian's blood. He helped her down, his hand firm and cold around hers. Stay close, he murmured. And remember, you are Lady Alara of House Tenebris now. No one may touch you without consequence. She straightened her spine, feeling the weight of the title settle over her like armor. They walked together into the night market. It was overwhelming. Alara had prepared herself for crowds, for noise, for the press of bodies and voices. What she hadn't prepared for was the strangeness of it, the way footsteps made no sound despite the number of people moving around her. The conversations that seemed to happen in whispers, and yet carried perfectly clear across impossible distances. Caspian, a woman's voice, smooth as silk and edged with amusement. How unexpected to see you here. I heard House Moreau had you cowering in your manor, Lady Serafini. Caspian's tone was polite, cool. I had heard House Valenshade was neutral in this matter. We are. Which is why I'm delighted to see you've brought a guest. The woman's attention shifted. And this must be the bride. How charming. Alara felt the weight of the woman's gaze, assessing and sharp. Lady Alara, she said, offering her hand. A pleasure to meet you, Lady Serafini. Cool fingers touched hers briefly. The pleasure is mine. Tell me, how are you finding married life in House Tenebris? Not too isolated, I hope? There was something pointed in the question, a test disguised as pleasantry. I find it refreshing, Alara said smoothly. After years of being talked over and ignored, it's pleasant to be in a house where my thoughts are valued. She felt Serafini's surprise in the slight pause that followed. Indeed, the woman said, a note of genuine interest creeping into her voice. Well, I see Caspian has chosen more wisely than some believed. Enjoy the market, Lady Alara, and do be careful, not all houses are as enlightened as ours. She swept away, leaving a trail of jasmine perfume in her wake. Well done, Caspian murmured. She'll spread word that you're not to be underestimated. Was that the goal? Part of it. His hand settled at the small of her back, guiding her forward. The other part was ensuring House Valenshade remains neutral. Serafini respects intelligence. You've made an impression. They moved deeper into the market, and Alara began to map it in her mind. Stalls to the left selling what sounded like fabric, the whisper of silk and velvet. To the right, glassware that chimed like bells when touched. Ahead, music played on instruments she couldn't name, haunting melodies that seemed to wrap around the crowd like smoke. House Moreau's delegation is near the center, Caspian said quietly. I can see their banners. We need to approach carefully. Let me lead, Alara said. What? I'm the innocent wife, curious about the market. You're the attentive husband showing me around. She squeezed his arm. If I happen to stumble near their stalls, if I happen to strike up conversation with their servants, it's nothing suspicious. She felt his hesitation, then acceptance. Very well. But I won't leave your side. I wouldn't expect you to. They made their way toward the center of the market, Alara's cane tapping a careful rhythm against the ground. As they approached, she heard voices younger, rougher than the polished tones of the nobles, servants, retainers. Perfect. Oh, Alara said, deliberately stumbling slightly. I'm sorry, the ground changed. Is this a stall? Easy, my lady. A young man's voice, concerned. Here. Let me help. Oh, you're with House Tenebris. His tone shifted instantly, wary. I am, Alara said pleasantly. And I apologize for the intrusion. I'm still learning to navigate these gatherings. She tilted her head. Are you with one of the delegations? A pause. House Moreau, my lady. Alara felt Caspian go tense beside her, but his expression she assumed remained neutral. How wonderful, she said. I've heard the southern cities are beautiful. Have you been in service long? 5 years, my lady. Then perhaps you knew someone. I heard a sad story recently, about a young man from your house's territory. Thomas Aldridge. His death was such a tragedy. The silence that followed was heavy. Wrong. Yes, my lady. I knew him. Did you? Alara's voice filled with sympathy. I'm so sorry. Were you close? We grew up in the same village. The young man's voice had gone tight. He was a good person. Didn't deserve what happened. No one deserves such violence, Alara agreed softly. I hope his family is being cared for. His mother, his sisters. His mother, yes, but, the servant hesitated. There's only one sister now, my lady. Margarethi. The younger one died years ago. Alara's heart stuttered. One sister. Not two. I'm sorry, she said carefully. I must have misunderstood. I thought I'd heard there were two. Common mistake, my lady. Margaretti talks about her younger sister often. Keeps her memory alive. His voice softened. She took Thomas's death hard. Left the village entirely. Last I heard, she'd gone north, looking for work. How terrible for her, Alara murmured. To lose so much family. Indeed, my lady. Someone called the servant's name, a sharper voice, commanding. He excused himself quickly, and Alara felt him retreat into the crowd. She stood very still, her mind racing. Did you hear? She began. Yes, Caspian said quietly. The younger sister died years ago, which means someone lied in the household records. Or the woman who came to your manor wasn't Margaretti Aldridge at all. Alara finished. She was an imposter. Someone who knew enough about the family to pose as the sister, but made a critical mistake. Caspian's hand tightened on her arm. Someone who came specifically to steal my blood and gather information, which means this conspiracy goes deeper than we thought, much deeper, around them. The night market continued its strange revelry, vampires and mortals moving through a world of bargains and blood, unaware that in their midst, two hunters had just found their first real lead. We need to find the real Margaretti, Alara said. She might not even know her brother is dead. She might not know someone used her name to frame you. If she's still alive. If she's still alive. Alara echoed grimly. Caspian pulled her closer as they began to move through the crowd. This was brilliant, he said quietly. You were brilliant. We're not done yet. No, he agreed. But we're closer, above them, unseen by Alara, but felt in the sudden chill that swept through the market. Clouds covered the moon, and somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching, someone who had not expected the blind bride to start asking questions, someone who would need to act, soon. Chapter 7. Blood in the garden. They didn't make it back to the carriage. The attack came as they crossed the garden that separated the night market from the carriages, a space of cultivated darkness where night-blooming flowers released perfume heavy as wine. Alara heard the whisper of movement, a heartbeat before Caspian shoved her behind him. Stay down, he commanded. 3 figures materialized from the shadows. Alara couldn't see them, but she felt their presence, cold like Caspian, but different. Hungry, predatory. Lord Caspian, one of them said, voice smooth and mocking. Walking unguarded through neutral ground. How trusting. This is a violation of the market's sanctuary, Caspian said, his voice ice and warning. Strike me here, and every house will demand your blood, only if there are witnesses. The speaker moved closer. And I see none. Just you, your blind little wife, and 3 members of House Moreau who will swear you attacked first. Alara's fingers found the knife. Caspian had insisted she carry a small blade strapped to her thigh beneath layers of skirts. She'd thought it paranoid. Now she blessed his foresight. You won't touch her, Caspian said, and something in his voice made Alara's breath catch. This was not the careful scholar she had come to know. This was something older, dangerous. We don't want the girl, the vampire said. Just you, dead or alive, though dead would be simpler. Then come and try. What followed was violence too fast for Alara to track the sound of bodies colliding. The sharp crack of bone, a hiss that might have been pain or fury. She pressed herself against the garden wall, knife in hand, tracking movement by sound alone. A body hit the ground near her. Too close. The wife. Someone snarled. If we can't have him, well, Alara struck. She couldn't see where the vampire was, but she'd spent 23 years navigating the world by sound and proximity. She knew exactly where his voice had come from, exactly how close he'd gotten. The knife found flesh, cold flesh that didn't bleed right, and the vampire screamed. Silver, he gasped. The blade is silver. His words cut off as Caspian was there, moving with inhuman speed. Alara heard the wet sound of tearing, then silence. 2 left, Caspian said, his voice rough. Alara, stay exactly where you are. She obeyed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The fight moved away from her, clashing somewhere among the flowers, the sounds of predators locked in combat. She tracked it as best she could, her fingers white-knuckled around the knife handle. Then, abruptly, silence. Caspian? She called. Here. His voice came from her right, closer than she'd expected. Are you hurt? Know you? Nothing that won't heal. She heard him moving, heard the drag of something heavy across grass. But we need to leave, now, before anyone comes to investigate. His hand found hers, pulling her away from the wall. They moved quickly through the garden, Alara's cane abandoned in favor of speed. She held tight to Caspian's arm as he navigated them through what felt like a maze of paths and hedges. The third one, she asked, fled. His voice was grim. Which means House Moreau will know their assassination attempt failed, and that I killed one of them. Caspian stopped walking. You saved my life. I got lucky. No, his hands cupped her face, cold palms against her flushed cheeks. You were brave and brilliant and deadly. That vampire underestimated you because you're mortal and blind. It cost him his existence. Aylara's breath came short, not from fear now, but from the intensity in Caspian's voice. From the way his thumb traced her cheekbone with something like reverence. We should go, she managed. Yes, but he didn't move, didn't release her. Aylara, I need you to understand something. What just happened? House Moreau just broke every law of the Accords. They attacked on neutral ground. They attempted to murder a lord and his wife during a sanctioned gathering. His voice dropped lower. This means war is inevitable now. And you're caught in the center of it. I chose to be here, she said firmly. You didn't choose to marry into a house on the brink of destruction, didn't I? She reached up, finding his wrists, circling them with her fingers. I chose to help you investigate. I chose to go to the night market. I chose to fight when they came for us. She squeezed gently. I'm choosing this, Caspian. All of it, in the darkness of the garden, surrounded by the scent of night flowers and spilled blood. She felt him lean closer. His forehead touched hers, cold against warm. I don't deserve you, he whispered. That's not for you to decide. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, something raw and unguarded. Then he released her, stepping back, and she felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. Come, he said, his voice controlled again. The carriage is close. They found it without incident, and soon they were moving, racing through the night toward House Tenebris. Aylara sat across from Caspian, feeling the weight of what had happened settle over her like a shroud. They were trying to kill you before you could clear your name, she said. Yes, which means we're getting close. The imposter, the stolen blood, Thomas's murder. Someone is afraid we'll uncover the truth. Someone with resources, with access to House Moreau's warriors. Caspian's voice was thoughtful. The question is, who benefits from a war between our houses? Not House Moreau, Aylara said slowly. If they truly wanted you dead, they could have challenged you openly, demanded a trial by combat. The Accords allow for that. So why frame me instead? Because someone wants both houses weakened. The pieces were starting to fit together in Aylara's mind. Someone who benefits from House Tenebris and House Moreau destroying each other. One of the other 5 houses. Caspian's voice held grim realization. But which one? And how do we prove it? Aylara leaned forward, reaching across the space between them until her hand found his knee. The real Margarethi Aldridge, she said. She's the key. If we can find her, if she can tell us who recruited her brother, who knew enough about their family to send an imposter in her name, we find our conspirator. Exactly. The carriage jolted over a rough patch of road, throwing Aylara against the seat. Caspian's hand shot out to steady her, and this time he didn't let go. When we get back to the manor, he said quietly, I'm doubling the guards around your chambers. I'm restricting access to the family wing. And I'm teaching you how to fight properly, not just lucky strikes in the dark, but real combat. Caspian, you're a target now, he interrupted. House Moreau knows you killed one of theirs. They know you're investigating. They will come for you, Aylara, and I need to know you can defend yourself when they do. She heard the fear beneath his words, carefully controlled, but present nonetheless. All right, she said softly. Teach me. His fingers tightened around hers. We'll start tomorrow night, he said. After sunset. In the training hall. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we search the archives for any mention of Margarethi Aldridge, any record of where she might have gone when she left her village. He paused. And we prepare for war. The carriage rolled on through the darkness, carrying them back to a house that felt less like sanctuary with every passing moment. Behind them, in the garden where blood had spilled, the remaining vampire from House Moreau watched the carriage disappear into the night, and smiled. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Chapter 8. Steel and Secrets. Training hall smelled of old stone and steel. Aylara stood in the center of the room, her fingers wrapped around the hilt of a practice blade. It was lighter than she'd expected, balanced in a way that felt almost natural in her grip. Caspian moved around her in a slow circle. She tracked him by the displacement of air, by the soft whisper of his boots against the floor. The first lesson, he said, is understanding that you will never see an attack coming. So you must learn to feel it instead. How? Close your eyes. Alara almost laughed. They are closed. Or might as well be. Then empty your mind of everything except sensation. The air against your skin. The sound of breathing, even breathing that isn't necessary. The shift in temperature when someone moves close. His voice circled her. Vampires are predators, Alara. We're built to be silent, invisible. But we still exist in space. We still have mass and presence. She focused, letting her other senses sharpen. There a coolness to her left, growing stronger. She turned toward it, raising her blade. Good, Caspian said, now directly in front of her. You felt me move. Now, what do you do? Strike? Too aggressive. You don't know if I'm attacking or simply observing. First rule of combat. Don't waste energy on assumptions. He moved again, faster this time, and she felt the displacement of air as something passed near her shoulder. I just struck. Where? My right shoulder. Correct. How do you defend? Alara raised her blade instinctively, angling it to intercept. Metal met metal with a sharp ring that echoed through the hall. Better, Caspian said. But you're too slow. A vampire moves faster than human reflexes can track. You need to anticipate, not react. How am I supposed to anticipate something I can't see or hear? By reading patterns. By understanding your opponent. His voice dropped lower, moving closer. Every fighter has habits, preferences. I favor the left side, did you notice? Every strike I've made has come from your right, because I naturally circle counterclockwise. Alara hadn't noticed. But now that he mentioned it, she realized the coolness had always approached from the same direction. Show me again, she said. They trained for hours. Caspian taught her to read the minute changes in air pressure that preceded an attack, to pivot with her hips rather than her shoulders for better balance, to use her height smaller than most vampires as an advantage for striking low and fast. He was patient but merciless, correcting her grip, her stance, her breathing. You're trembling, he observed, catching her wrist as she attempted another strike. I'm tired. Tired gets you killed. But his voice had softened. We'll stop for tonight. You've done well. Alara lowered her blade, her muscles burning with exertion. Sweat dampened her skin despite the coolness of the hall. She felt Caspian's hand at her elbow, steadying her. Come, he said. There's something I want to show you. He led her from the training hall down a corridor she didn't recognize, then through a doorway that opened onto cold air and the scent of earth and stone. The catacombs? She asked. The deep archive, Caspian corrected, where House Tenebris keeps its oldest records. I've been searching through the lineage documents, looking for any mention of the Aldridge family. They descended stairs. She counted 73 steps until the temperature dropped significantly and the air tasted of minerals and age. Caspian's hand remained steady on her arm as he guided her through what felt like a labyrinth of passages. Finally, they stopped. Sit, he said, and she felt him guide her to a chair. I've found something. Several things actually. She heard the rustle of parchment, the creak of old leather bindings. The Aldridge family has been in House Moreau's territory for 6 generations, Caspian said. Farmers, mostly. Unremarkable. Until Thomas's grandfather, who served as a retainer to House Moreau for 30 years. A retainer, Alara repeated. That means he had access to their inner workings. Their politics. Exactly. And according to these records, he was dismissed under mysterious circumstances 40 years ago. No explanation given. Just a notation that he was released from service and sent back to his village with a substantial payment. Hush money, Alara said. That would be my interpretation. Papers rustled again. But here's what's interesting. 6 months after his dismissal, a young woman from House Valanshade went missing. Serafini's sister, actually. She was never found. Alara's breath caught. You think the grandfather was involved? I think he saw something he shouldn't have. Something House Moreau wanted hidden badly enough to pay for his silence. Caspian's voice grew thoughtful. And I think that secret, whatever it was, has remained buried for 40 years. Until Thomas Aldridge the grandson somehow learned of it. And that's why he was killed, Alara said slowly. Not to frame you. That was just convenient. The real reason was to silence him before he could reveal what his grandfather knew, which means Margaretti might be in danger too. If she knows what her brother discovered, we need to find her, Alara interrupted. Now, before whoever killed Thomas realizes, she might know the truth. Caspian was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. I know where she is, he said quietly. What? I received word an hour before we began training. One of my contacts in the Northern Territories found her. She's been working in a tavern under an assumed name, hiding from House Moreau. He paused. She's terrified, Alara. She knows her brother was murdered, and she knows she might be next. Then we bring her here. Under House Tenebris's protection. It's not that simple. The Northern Territories are controlled by House Somner. To retrieve her, I would need to travel there personally. And leaving the manor now, with House Moreau actively hunting me. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. How long would you be gone? Alara asked. 3 days. Maybe 4. And if you don't go? Then Margarethi remains vulnerable. And we lose our best chance of uncovering the truth. Alara stood, moving toward where she knew Caspian sat among his ancient documents. Her hands found his shoulders, cold and tense beneath her touch. Go, she said firmly. I can't leave you unprotected. You'll leave guards. You'll leave trusted retainers. She squeezed his shoulders. And you'll leave me with everything you've taught me. I can defend myself now. Maybe not perfectly, but enough. Alara, this is bigger than protecting me, she interrupted. A woman from House Valenshade disappeared. A man was murdered to keep secrets buried. If we don't act now, more people will die. Maybe hundreds if this war escalates. She leaned closer. You have to go. And I have to stay here and continue researching. Between us, we'll find the truth. She felt him turn. Felt his cold hands cover hers where they rested on his shoulders. You're asking me to choose between your safety and finding justice, he said quietly. I'm asking you to trust that I can take care of myself long enough for you to do what needs to be done. In the deep archive, surrounded by centuries of secrets and lies, Caspian pulled her hands to his lips. The kiss he pressed to her knuckles was cold, gentle, and filled with everything he couldn't say. 3 days, he said. I'll be gone 3 days. And if anything happens, anything, you send word immediately. I will. Promise me, Alara. I promise. He released her hands slowly, reluctantly. I leave at dawn, he said. Before the sun forces the stasis. I'll travel in a sealed carriage and reach House Somner's territory by tomorrow night, and I'll keep searching the archives. There has to be more information about what the grandfather witnessed. About Serafini's sister. Be careful, Caspian said. If someone in this house is working with the conspirators, then they've already made one mistake by underestimating me. I won't give them a second chance. He stood, and she felt him move closer. Felt the cold of him like winter against her skin. When I return, he said softly, we're going to have a conversation about why you insist on being so fearlessly reckless. I look forward to it. His fingers brushed her cheek. Just once, feather light. Then he was gone. Moving through the catacombs with inhuman silence, leaving Alara alone among the secrets of House Tenebris, she sat back down, her hands finding the parchments he'd been studying, her fingers tracing letters she couldn't read, but could feel embossed in the old ink. 3 days. She had 3 days to uncover 40 years of buried truth. 3 days before Caspian returned. 3 days before whoever was watching made their next move. Alara smiled grimly into the darkness and began to work. Chapter 9. The Shadow in the Ark of Esthi. Second night of Caspian's absence. Alara found the hidden room. She had spent the previous day and night in the deep archives, her fingers tracing document after document, memorizing the textures of different inks and papers, learning to distinguish House Tenebris records from correspondence with other houses. The servants brought her meals. She barely touched. Tea that went cold while she worked. It was the air that gave it away. She'd been following a wall of shelves, running her fingers along the spines of bound volumes, when she felt it a draft where there shouldn't be one. Cold air seeping through what should have been solid stone. Alara pressed her palm flat against the wall. The surface was smooth, seamless, but the draft persisted. She explored methodically, searching for a seam, a lever, anything that might indicate a hidden mechanism. Her fingers found it low. Near the floor, a carved symbol that felt different from the decorative elements surrounding it. She pressed, and something clicked. The wall shifted. A doorway opened, releasing air that smelled of dust and something older, something that made her skin prickle with instinctive warning. Alara hesitated only a moment before stepping through. The hidden room was small. She mapped it quickly, finding walls close enough to touch on all sides. Shelves lined the space, but these held different documents. Older, the parchment crumbled slightly under her careful touch, and there, on a small table in the center, a book, not bound in leather like the others. This one felt different. The cover was metal, cold even in this freezing space, and inscribed with symbols her fingers couldn't decipher. When she opened it, the pages inside were stiff, resistant. She began to read with her fingertips. The first entries were mundane household expenses, retainer assignments. But as she progressed, the content shifted. Names she recognized from Caspian's lessons appeared: House Moreau, House Valanshade, negotiations and treaties from decades past. Then, 40 years ago, the entries changed. The handwriting became hurried. The impressions in the parchment deeper, as though whoever had written this had been pressing hard with emotion or fear. Ilara traced each word carefully. Serafini's sister found dead. Body discovered in Moreau territory. House Moreau claims ignorance. Serafini demands investigation. Lord Theron refuses. Cites lack of evidence. Suspicious. The girl's blood was drained completely. Professional kill. Retainer Aldridge witnessed disposal of evidence. He must be silenced. Ilara's hand stilled. Aldridge paid and dismissed. Swore blood oath never to speak of what he saw. Threat implicit. His family's safety depends on silence. Lord Theron believes matter settled. Serafini does not believe Moreau's innocence. Threatens to bring evidence to night courts. Lord Theron warns her such action would mean war. She backs down. For now. Note, Aldridge's silence secured, but his knowledge remains dangerous. His line must be watched. The entries stopped abruptly. After that, Ilara sat back, her mind racing. Lord Theron, she knew that name. Caspian's predecessor. The head of House Tenebris, who had died 20 years ago under mysterious circumstances. Lord Theron had covered up a murder. Not just any murder, the killing of a noble from House Valanshade, committed in House Moreau's territory. And he'd paid off the only witness, the Aldridge grandfather, to keep it quiet rather than risk war between the houses. But why? What could House Moreau have offered Lord Theron that was worth protecting a murderer? You shouldn't be here. The voice came from behind her, cold and unfamiliar. Ilara spun, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife at her thigh. Who are you? Someone who's been watching you stumble around these archives for 2 days, waiting to see if you'd find what you shouldn't. Footsteps moved closer. I must admit, I'm impressed. Even blind, you're dangerously clever. The voice was male, refined, with the particular quality that marked him as vampire. But not one she'd met before. You're not from House Tenebris, Ilara said, backing against the table. No, but I've had access to it for 40 years. A soft laugh. You're holding the evidence that would have prevented this entire war. The proof that House Moreau killed Serafini's sister, and that Lord Theron helped them hide it. Why? Ilara demanded. Why would he protect them? Because House Moreau promised him something he wanted more than justice. More than honor. The vampire moved closer, and Ilara felt the terrible cold of him. They promised him the secret to walking in daylight. Her breath caught. It was a lie, of course, the vampire continued. But Theron was desperate. He'd been trying for decades to find a way to break the sun's hold on our kind. When Moreau offered him ancient texts, forbidden rituals that might grant him freedom from the stasis, he paused. He was willing to do anything, including covering up murder. And you? Ilara asked, her fingers tightening on her knife. Where do you fit in this? I was Theron's assistant, his researcher. I helped him search for the daylight cure. Bitterness crept into his voice. And when he died, killed by the very rituals he tried to perform, I continued his work. But I needed funding, resources, so I made a deal with House Moreau. Understanding crashed over Ilara like cold water. You framed Caspian, she breathed. You stole his blood, sent the impostor to the manor, arranged Thomas Aldridge's murder, all of it. To give House Moreau the excuse they needed to start a war, and to ensure House Tenebris would be too distracted to notice what I was really doing. The vampire agreed. Theron's research is almost complete. When I succeed, when I can walk in sunlight, I'll be unstoppable. More powerful than any house. You're insane. I'm visionary. He moved so close Ilara could feel his breath, unnecessary breath, performed for effect. And you, little mortal, are the only loose thread. The only person besides Caspian who knows enough to unravel everything. Ilara's hand found the knife, pulled it free. Caspian will kill you when he returns. Caspian won't return. The vampire's voice held cruel satisfaction. Do you really think I let him leave without arranging an accident? By now, House Somner's roads have claimed another victim. So tragic. Rage flooded through Alara, hot and fierce. You're wrong, she said. About everything. Caspian is stronger than you know. And I'm not as helpless as you think. She struck. The blade found flesh. She felt it sink deep, felt the vampire's shock as silver burned through his chest. But he was faster than the assassin in the garden, older, more experienced. His hand caught her wrist, twisting viciously. The knife clattered to the floor. Brave, he hissed. But ultimately futile. His other hand closed around her throat. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. She clawed at his grip, her vision already dark beginning to fade into something deeper. She felt herself lifted, felt her feet leave the ground. This was how she would die, strangled in a hidden room, her body left to be discovered days from now, if ever. No. The word blazed through her mind with fierce determination. She stopped, struggling against his hand. Instead, she reached down, her fingers, finding his belt, his tunic, searching desperately there, a second blade, smaller than hers, but steel nonetheless. She pulled it free and drove it upward with all her remaining strength, aiming for where his heart would be. The vampire screamed, his grip released, and Alara fell, gasping, her throat burning. She heard him stagger backward, heard the wet sound of him pulling the blade from his chest. Silver, he choked. You how your own weapon, Alara rasped. You should have checked your belt. She scrambled backward, finding the table, using it to pull herself upright. Her hands closed around the metal-bound book. The vampire lunged. Alara swung the book with everything she had. The metal edge caught him across the temple with a sound like a bell ringing. He went down hard, and she heard him collapse against the stone floor. Silence. Alara stood trembling. The book clutched in her hands, listening for any sound of movement. Nothing. She'd either killed him or knocked him unconscious. Either way, she had minutes at most. She grabbed the book and ran. Chapter 10. Dawnbreak. Angelara burst into the manor's main hall, the metal-bound book clutched to her chest, her throat bruised and aching. Guards, she shouted, her voice raw. Send riders north immediately. Lord Caspian is in danger. House Somner's roads. There's been sabotage. Footsteps rushed toward her. Hands steadied her shoulders. My lady, what happened? The head of Caspian's personal guard, a vampire named Marcus, whom she'd met once in passing, traitor in the house, Alara gasped. Deep archives. Hidden room behind the eastern wall. He's there unconscious or dead. He confessed to everything. Framing Lord Caspian, Thomas Aldridge's murder. Planning an assassination on the northern roads. Send 4 riders, Marcus commanded. Fast horses. North to House Somner's territory. Find Lord Caspian and warn him of the trap. Already moving, sir, someone called. Marcus turned his attention back to Alara. Are you injured? Bruises. Nothing serious. She thrust the book toward him. This contains proof. Lord Theron's private records. The cover-up of a murder 40 years ago, the conspiracy with House Moreau. Everything we need to prove Caspian's innocence and expose the real traitor. Marcus took the book carefully. And the traitor's name? He never said. But he was Lord Theron's assistant. A researcher who's been living in this house for 40 years, working on. She paused, realizing how insane it would sound. On a ritual to walk in daylight. Edmund, Marcus said grimly. Lord Theron's head scholar. He disappeared 20 years ago, right after Theron's death. We assumed he'd fled in disgrace. He's been here the whole time, hiding, planning. Alara swayed slightly, and Marcus steadied her again. Get the lady to her chambers, he ordered. Post guards at her door. No one enters except by my express permission. No, Alara interrupted. The evidence room. I need to secure this book somewhere safer than my chambers. And I need to send word to House Valanshade to Lady Serafini. She deserves to know. We've found proof of what happened to her sister. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. I'll accompany you personally. They secured the book in House Tenebrous' strongest vault, behind wards and locks that even vampires couldn't easily breach. Then Alara penned a letter to Serafini. Marcus transcribed her words into elegant script, explaining everything they'd discovered. By the time they finished, dawn was approaching. Alara felt it in the growing tension among the vampires around her. In the way they began retreating toward the catacombs and sealed chambers where sunlight couldn't reach them. You should rest, my lady, Marcus said. We'll keep watch. When Lord Caspian returns, if he returns, Alara corrected quietly. When he returns, Marcus repeated firmly. He'll want to find you safe. Ilara nodded, too exhausted to argue, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay in her chambers, her throat aching, her mind racing through everything that had happened. Edmund's confession, the revelation about Lord Theron's corruption, the conspiracy that had spanned 4 decades and cost countless lives, and Caspian, somewhere on the northern roads, riding into a trap she prayed they'd warned him about in time. The sun rose. The manor fell into the peculiar silence of a vampire household during daylight, the living servants moving quietly, the undead locked in their death-like sleep. Alara rose and returned to the archives. If Caspian didn't survive, if the warning came too late, she needed to be certain the evidence was ironclad. She needed to find every piece of Lord Theron's conspiracy, every connection to House Moreau, every detail that would prove Caspian's innocence, even in his absence. She worked through the day, her fingers tracing documents, her mind cataloging information. She found letters between Theron and House Moreau's former lord, coded references to the Valenshade problem and the Daylight Project. She found payment records showing substantial sums transferred to the Aldridge family over the years, hush money, renewed each generation to ensure silence, and she found Theron's final journal entry, written the night before he died. The ritual is ready. Tomorrow at dawn, I attempt the transformation. If I succeed, I will be the first of our kind to walk in sunlight in 4,000 years. If I fail, let Edmund continue my work. Let him succeed where I could not. The price we've paid, the lies, the deaths, the corruption, all of it will be justified when our kind is finally free. He had died trying to break the sun's hold, and Edmund had inherited his obsession, his research, and his willingness to sacrifice anyone who stood in the way. Ilara was still reading when she heard the commotion above, horses, voices shouting, the sudden rush of activity that meant something significant had happened. She abandoned the archives and hurried upstairs, her cane tapping frantically against stone. What's happening? She demanded of the first servant she encountered. My lady, Lord Caspian has returned. Ilara didn't wait to hear the rest. She ran. She found him in the main hall, surrounded by guards and retainers. She knew it was him before anyone spoke, knew it by the particular quality of cold that preceded him, by the way her heart stuttered in her chest. Caspian, she breathed. The crowd parted. She heard his footsteps, fast and urgent, and then his hands were on her shoulders, cold and careful, and trembling slightly. You're alive, he said roughly. Marcus sent word about Edmund, about the attack. I thought I'm fine. Her hands found his chest, his arms, confirming he was real, whole, undamaged. The riders reached you in time? Barely. Edmund had arranged for the bridge to collapse. We would have been killed or worse, trapped in sunlight while injured. His hands moved to her face, tilting it upward. But you, Marcus said Edmund tried to kill you. That you fought him alone. I had a good teacher. She managed a shaky smile. Is he dead? No, unconscious still, locked in silver chains in the deep vault. He'll face the night courts for his crimes. Caspian's thumb traced her bruised throat, feather light. He hurt you. I hurt him worse. Despite everything, she heard him laugh, a brief, startled sound. I have no doubt. His forehead touched hers, cold against warm. I should never have left you. You had to. We have Margarethi now, safe in house. Somner's protection on her way here. She's confirmed everything. Her brother discovered the truth about their grandfather's blood oath, confronted House Moreau about the covered-up murder. That's why they killed him. His hands tightened on her face. And Edmund used it perfectly to frame me. But we have proof now. Theron's records, Edmund's confession to me, Margarethi's testimony, Serafini's sister's murder. It's enough, Caspian confirmed. More than enough. I've already sent word to the night courts. Emergency session called. All 7 houses must attend, and House Moreau will answer for their part in the conspiracy, for covering up murder, for attempting assassination on neutral ground, for he paused. For 40 years of corruption that cost innocent lives. Ilara felt the weight of it settling, not the weight of fear or uncertainty, but of completion, of a hunt successfully concluded. It's over, she said softly. Not quite. Caspian's hands slipped from her face to her hands, cold fingers intertwining with warm. There's still the matter of us. Her breath caught. Us? You married me to save your village. You stayed because you're brave and stubborn and impossibly noble. His voice dropped lower. But the debt is paid now, Ilara. House Moreau's threat is ended. Your village is safe, which means you're free to leave. To return to mortal life, away from vampire politics and blood oaths and houses that would see you dead for knowing too much. Alara's hands tightened on his. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. For me to leave? I want you to choose. The words came rough, honest. Not because you're bound by marriage vows or political necessity. Not because you're trapped or afraid. I want you to choose freely, stay or go, whatever brings you peace. She felt the enormity of what he was offering. True freedom. True choice. And if I stay? She asked. Then you stay as my equal. My partner. Not a political shield or a convenient wife, but he hesitated, and she felt vulnerability radiate from him like cold. But as someone I love. Someone I would spend eternity protecting and learning and simply being beside. Tears pricked Alara's eyes. You love me, she said. Not quite a question. Desperately. Completely. Against all reason and all my careful control. His laugh was shaky. You terrify me, Alara. You make me feel things I haven't felt in 200 years. You make me want impossible things. Such as a future. Such as partnership. Such as his voice dropped to a whisper. Such as offering you immortality, if you wanted it. Not as a prison, but as a choice. Years together instead of decades. Centuries to investigate mysteries and fight injustice and drive each other to distraction. Alara's heart thundered in her chest. I'm mortal, she said. Fragile, blind. I'll never see your face or walk in sunlight beside you. Or you're brilliant, Caspian interrupted fiercely. And brave and deadly, and everything I never knew I needed. Your blindness doesn't make you less. Your mortality doesn't make you weak. You've saved my life twice now, solved a conspiracy that eluded me for weeks, and brought down a traitor who had 4 decades to perfect his plans. His hands cupped her face again. You are extraordinary, exactly as you are. I killed a vampire for you, Alara said, her voice breaking. I would have died in that hidden room rather than let Edmund destroy you. I know. I chose this, Caspian. The investigation, the danger, the training, all of it. Not because I was trapped, but because she drew a shaking breath. Because somewhere between that first night in the stables and now, I fell in love with a vampire who showed me more respect and kindness than any mortal ever did. She felt him go still. Say it again, he whispered. I love you. The words came easier now. Certain and true. I choose you. I choose this house, this life, this partnership. I choose. He kissed her. His lips were cold against hers, gentle despite the intensity behind them. Alara melted into it, her hands finding his shoulders, his neck, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and she tasted forever on his tongue. Centuries of loneliness ended. Eternity spread before them like an unwritten book. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, one by necessity, one by choice. Caspian rested his forehead against hers. The night courts convene in 3 days, he said quietly. After that, when Edmund and House Moreau face judgment, when the conspiracy is laid bare before all 7 houses, he paused. Would you consider it? Immortality? I don't need forever to be certain of this, Alara said. But I'll think about it. We'll decide together, Caspian agreed. Around them, House Tenebris stirred with life, servants moving, guards changing shifts, the manor settling into evening routines. Outside, night fell soft and complete, and in the main hall, a vampire and his mortal wife stood wrapped in each other's arms. Having survived conspiracy and assassination and the weight of ancient secrets, they had chosen each other freely, and that, Alara thought, as Caspian's cold hand found hers and held tight, was all the eternity she needed. For now. Epilogue note, 3 months later. The night courts ruled in favor of House Tenebris. Edmund was sentenced to true death for his crimes. House Moreau's current lord, who had no knowledge of his predecessor's conspiracy, offered formal reparations. And Lady Serafini, finally granted justice for her sister's murder, became House Tenebris's strongest ally. As for Alara, she chose to remain mortal for now, learning, growing, walking beside Caspian through political intrigue and quiet nights in the library. When the time came to choose immortality, she would do so with full knowledge of what it meant, but that was a decision for another day. Tonight, she simply walked with her husband through the gardens where they'd first fought together. Her hand in his, their future unwritten and beautiful in its uncertainty.